Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first live Red Tape podcast episode. I'm Kelli Pierce, and this is my co-host, the world-famous Shoshana Weissmann.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely clap for her. She's amazing.
Kelli, what the hell?
You know, Shosha, I think the U.S. is in a very interesting place right now.
Right now, like just right now.
I mean, it kind of always is because, you know, like nostalgia is a hell of a drug, right?
It really is, the member berries, you know.
Yeah. But I mean, honestly, I do think like the 2024 election was kind of unique, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw this meme that was circulating at the time, and it was like an American flag at the top, and it said, I think it said something to the effect of, have you tried turning it off and back on again?
Yeah, have you tried turning it on and off again? That's the meme format.
Yeah. So it was just like, I don't know. I don't know how to explain the 2024 election other than like we ended up re-electing a game show host for president of the United States. And for most of it, he was kind of running against this like, I don't know, like kind of grandfatherly type guy that probably watches game shows and gets angry at the TV when he can't follow things.
Yeah, and Biden leaned his team leaned into so much with social media, and they were following that, and Trump's team obviously does a lot with social media, so it's like great that like X, formerly Twitter, is kind of where all our policy is coming from.
No, it does seem like we're living in Twitter, oh my gosh. Like, speaking of Twitter, like, since we're living in Twitter, in real life, who would you choose to be from Twitter in the president's cabinet? I mean, just the top three, maybe.
I think if I'm choosing three, I think it's like Scott Lincecum, I think, has to. Not me, I don't want to.
Good choice.
Jarvis, if you guys are familiar with Jarvis, he's good. He's a little nuts, but that's like right for Twitter. And then I think the obvious last one is like 3-year Letterman.
Oh, absolutely. Like, who would they be? Like, you know, how would Jarvis be? Like, yeah.
I guess Scott would have to be high up. He would have to be able to like save a lot of stuff. So like commerce or something like that.
That's a good choice.
3-year Letterman, Department of Financing waterbeds. Like that's, you got to get that under control. And then Jarvis, I guess, like, I could see him at OPM. I think OPM would be the right role for him to just like get stuff in line, communicate. But what about for you?
So I would go with 3-year Letterman as well.
Yeah,
obviously. Like, but I would put him Secretary of State. Because, I mean, you know, he can get into battles, right? You know, with foreign leaders on Twitter.
Yeah, could you imagine him versus like the head of Iran, like on Twitter? Like that would be great.
I know, we kind of need his services at the moment, right? Possibly. I would, even though he's not active right now, but I totally would put Weird Al at Doge.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Darth. Like, I was thinking if you're, like, not active accounts, I'm thinking Darth.
Oh, no. I honestly, like, I don't know if you've seen, like, Weird Al's social media over the years. Oh, it's the best. It's, like, him, like, doing corrections of grammar on, like, street signs and stuff like that.
It's
like,
amazing.
Yeah, it's like, that's the person you would need at Doge, and I think...
I love that.
For me, lastly, just to do the top three, probably Mary Catherine Ham at Education.
Oh, yeah. But that's too wholesome. You know, she would do too good a job, I feel like.
I know, but you need to have someone, right? With some sort of, like, competence, right?
That's fair. I picked Lincecum, so.
Yeah, true. So it kind of just make you wonder, though, like, I mean, we like to joke about Twitter, right? But who's actually running the government?
I have to assume the Doge dog is somewhere around there. Like, we've had a lot of talk of Doge, but, like, we've never seen the dog. I assume, like, at least someone on his team owns that kind of dog, you know?
You think he's doing a good job right now?
The dog?
The dog, yeah.
I haven't really seen much that's helping dogs one way or the other. Like, he's not delivering to his constituency, you know?
Oh, man. I think, you know, you actually need to get in there and, like, reform everything now.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in. Like, someone's going to elect me or appoint me. That'll go great for them.
Yeah, no, you can get into Twitter battles. I think the president would love it.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if there's any place for me to do it, it's not Congress, it's not Senate. It's going to be, like, the executive branch.
Well, I think we have two people as well who could also answer this question.
Better than me?
Well, that's debatable.
Okay.
We have the lovely Nan Swift and Megan McArdle here. So we want to bring them up on stage.
Yeah, and I'm going to go off.
thoughts on animals running the government.
Sure you do.
He's doing a pretty good job for a dog.
Yeah.
I mean, grading on a curve.
There's so many municipalities that have elected cats or dogs into these important positions, and I would like to do a survey of how they're doing budget-wise. Like, maybe that is a process reform we haven't considered yet.
I mean, the stake budget's going to go way up, but other than that.
I can get behind that. Well, just to introduce you, ladies, this, of course, you need no introduction, but Nan Swift, our resident fellow in the governance program here at R Street, and Megan McArdle, a columnist with the Washington Post. Thank you, ladies, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, our question is really like, who is running the government, but I want to take a little bit of a step back and we just didn't arrive here in the year 2025. A lot of things have led to where we are right now. And I'm kind of curious to get your take on what are maybe the 3 biggest structural issues we're facing in the United States.
I mean, number one, we are spending way more money than we are taking in tax revenue. And no one seems to have a plan to fix that, which is related to number 2. Congress has stopped working and political polarization is up, and those 2 things are indeed related. And I think number 3, we have not figured out how to build an economy that feels like it works for everyone. And at the moment, you are seeing this huge backlash, I think, largely driven by social media, not so much by any particular person on social media, but just the sheer fact that social media has destroyed all the old gatekeepers who helped to maintain a kind of level of social consensus that just doesn't exist.
How about you, Nan?
That's a very, very smart answer. Mine is less so,
okay.
And a lot more esoteric. I think some of the structural problems we have right now are in the mindset that people are coming from. One, there's kind of this just idea of perceived scarcity, that everything is a zero-sum game. And if someone else has something, that means I don't. And that's the end of it, and we've taken it off the shelf, and nothing more, there will never be more of anything, nothing multiplies. And we see this reflected in trade policy, in the way we treat immigrants, the way we do housing, the way people complain about billionaires and trillionaires. It's a really pervasive mindset issue. Along the same lines is a lack of patience and people just having no appreciation for the scope and breadth of history.
Yeah.
And that this moment is so fleeting. And any big changes that we can appreciate now came out of years and years and years and years, if not decades of work. And if we don't get that instantly, then that's, just no good, and we're gonna take our ball and go home and shake the dust from our sandals and salt everything with salt. And who knows what else, just people aren't patient and don't appreciate how small we are.
Yeah.
In a really profound way. And I also think there's this, I think I have 2 structural problems.
Hey, we
Those are
accept
my
2.
main ones.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want to piggyback off what you guys have been touching on, because it does kind of seem like we're in this terminally online culture, left and right, and that is just absolutely poisoning our political discourse. I don't know, just from the day-to-day. I don't know if you guys have seen that as well or experienced that, because you guys have been in Washington a lot longer than me.
Have I experienced the toxic online culture?
Just a little bit.
I believe there was the one time. Yes, I think, so this is a vaguely amusing story, or perhaps not. Some years ago, when my grandmother was dying, one of my relatives who went slightly crazy, my mother was the executive of the estate, and my relative, who shall remain nameless, started sending my mother some disturbing emails that like escalated into there was 1 a day, and then there was 7 a day, and then there was like the world would be a better place without you in it. My mother was understandably extremely freaked out. And she was like, should I go to the police? Should I file a restraining order? And she was very upset. I was like, and I'm just desperately trying to calm my mother down. So I'm like, Mom, I get death threats all the time. They never do anything. So fun fact, kids don't try this at home because it turns out the words, Mom, I get death threats all the time, do not in any way make mothers calmer. They do make them not focused on their own problems. But like, that it really is true. I think we way overweight the importance of this discourse, and we spend too much time participating in it. And I have a theory about why, or one reason that it's so nasty. I mean, there's all of the kind of standard things. It's depersonalizing. It's easy to like, you don't pick up any nuance in what people are saying, so it's easy to sort of load the worst possible interpretation on it. But I also think there is this thing, and what has become clear to me over the course of my writing career, which is now sadly into its 3rd decade, which means that I am getting old, is that a lot of people are literally just seeking out reasons to be angry. And they're angry at you if you do not provide them reasons to be angry.
Yeah.
I will frequently get people who will email me, like, why aren't you writing, whenever I write anything, why aren't you writing about Trump's executive orders or whatever? I will say, did you look at our page, which has 9 articles on Trump's executive orders? And I did not feel like my 10th one saying the same thing as the other 9. Also, I have just frankly run out of ways to say, like, Trump is bad and terrible, and please do not elect this man again. I used them all up during the first Trump administration. And I think it's because, when you're angry, if you think about it, and if you think about, when the kind of gentle pleasure of getting mildly irritated with your friends, where you're like, can you believe that guy on the cab and what he said, and you are not in any way going to affect the outcome of that engagement. It is over, it is past, but there is something enjoyable about that. And I think this is because when you are angry, first of all, it binds groups of people together, right? When we're all angry at the same person, we don't just feel angry, we feel a bond with other people. As Orwell sort of really most vividly memorialized in the 2 Minutes Hate in 1984. But the other thing is when you're angry, you are not anxious, you are not sad, you are not worried about your own mortality, you are not thinking about the ways in which you have failed your children, or any other kind of negative, right? It crowds every other emotion out. And so if you are anxious or sad or worried about your job or whatever, then being angry is like a really pleasant substitute. And the problem is that it, of course, also crowds out any positive emotions, and it makes you an angry person that other people don't want to be around in real life. And so I think it is like addictive, that thing of like, I have found something to be mad about, all of my other anxieties have trickled away, and that you really have to kind of try to discipline yourself off of it. I do think that like, eventually we're going to develop social technology to handle this, right? Every communications technology has led to massive social disruption. The printing press is obvious, but also like the telegraph and the telephone and radio, famously used by Hitler and fascists to build these, and the Soviet Union. And it takes some time to develop the social technology to handle those disruptions and to use them in a healthy way. I think we will get there, but we're definitely not there yet.
I want to say I don't think it's all bad.
Right.
Are you kidding? Social media is great. I learned about, I learned, there was a guy, it turned out he was a primatologist, and there was this meme going around, like, can 100 men fight one gorilla? What's a gorilla?
Yes.
And he was like, it turns out I am qualified to answer this question. And it also turns out he's like out in the woods looking at bears with some bear people. So they're now debating like which animals could, like how many men could defeat a polar bear. And it was amazing. Never leaving Twitter. This is high quality content. But
it's not like that. I've actually been able to observe up close and personal a really interesting phenomenon online with my mother. And it's
Really?
Not a crazy, scary story. It's that on Facebook, my mom reconnected with her graduating class. And it was huge. It was like over 1,000 people, like just enormous. And a lot of them were people that she wasn't necessarily close to or really knew at the time. But she discovered that they're all really nice. That everywhere else on her social media feeds, it's anger, it's stuff that she cannot believe. This is what my friend really thinks about people who are slightly different than her, and and the worst things that we all know. But of all places, on her little public school year of 1970 Facebook group, everyone is really nice. And they discuss politics, but nicely.
What?
And so it's not like, oh, we've taken this off the table. That is it's a healthier place than her church. It's amazing. And she just every day she's like, I can't believe it. I can't believe, and I'm part of this. And it has been such a wonderful thing in her life to realize this, and now to have a lot more friends at a time when most people aren't accruing relationships like that.
And I think that also, we way overestimate how much any of that is real, right? So we spent part of the year in Boston last year, and our neighbor, I'm pretty sure he voted for Trump. And I'm pretty sure he knows I didn't, because I wrote it in the Washington Post. But I'll tell you what, was when the smoke alarm in my dad's house went off, he was over there with the fire department, getting it taken care of, was, calling us to let us know that a window was open. That's what real people are like with other people. It's online. When I go out, when people talk about how all Americans hate each other, when I go out into the real world, I do not see all Americans acting like they hate each other. I see almost all Americans acting like they are fine, upstanding, decent human beings with fundamentally pro-social instincts. And so, I think we should not. The loudest voices on social media, sometimes perhaps including mine. Look, negativity sells, the algorithm likes it, it drives engagement, but that's not how most people are, even if they're angry on social media. And one of the really funny experiences I've had on both sides of it, I remember I wrote a really mean book review of Barry Lynn's book on offshoring for the New York Sun in 2003. And when I was writing it, I wasn't thinking about him. I was just starting in the business. I wasn't thinking about him as a human being who had spent 2 years writing this book. I was he is a big, important person who's written a book. And it's really fun to be mean about it. I'm I still disagree with his thesis, although I think it is, there are some, I take the arguments more seriously than I did 20 years ago. But then, I ended up at New America as a fellow, and he was there. And the first time at the first meeting, he was we should have lunch. I was oh yeah, we should have lunch. How about never? Because he clearly did not know. And then he came up to me 2 weeks later at the next meeting, and was I remember who you are. And I felt so bad. But I have also been on the other side of that, where people will write me these totally insane emails. And I will just write back, and I will be and they will have some grain of a point. I'll write back, and I'll be look, I understand you feel this way. I understand you're mad. Here's where I'm coming from. And sometimes they will just be you are an even worse human being than I thought. How dare you argue with me? But a lot of times they'll be oh, right, you're a person. And I'm now in communication with you. I'm really sorry. That was totally inappropriate. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm ashamed of myself, right? And which is what I said to Barry Lynn. Or should have. If I didn't, I now don't remember. But if I didn't say it, this is my apology to Barry Lynn. And that is healthy, right? That people, the minute they start seeing you as a person rather than this abstraction, not every single one of them, because yes, some people are indeed just psychopaths, but most of them will actually start behaving a lot more decently.
I'm afraid of the indecent in-person behavior that we've seen, especially during the last election, though. Language and signage in the Bible Belt and other very conservative areas where people of faith have no problem putting an F Biden flag on their giant truck or a sign in their yard, and do the rules or our faith just suddenly not apply there? I've been shocked to see how it's leached over in a new, and kind of unnerving way.
Oh yeah, to be clear, I think it does in fact real life, but even with the signage, right, it's a sign. It is less likely, now some people would, right? Just like some people when George Bush lost the election and I was like, okay, well he's done, let it go. People were like, no, going to the White House to chant na 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 na, right? Like they had to, including some friends of mine, which I just thought was like gratuitous. He lost the election, his party lost the election, he's gone. You can like be gracious, which is an instinct that's increasingly missing in our politics. But like, it's unlikely that most of those people, if they were in front of someone who voted for Biden, would just be like, F Biden and you, right? Like they would be like, would you like some more home fries? Right? Like,
it's like that episode of The Golden Girls where
myself.
Dorothy's like absolutely preparing to just rip into George H.W. Bush, and he comes to her front door and she just like freezes.
Yeah.
You know, like, in real life, she could not get those words out. That kind of
and that is pretty common because like mostly it's hard to be rude to people, and that's a fundamentally good instinct with some potential downsides. Sometimes you got to say the thing that people don't want to hear, but I think you never have to say it in the forms of F Biden or F Trump.
No, not at all. But I think people's genuine frustrations, though, are not only channeled in an unhealthy way online, but they don't understand that, like, A, we the people still control the United States, and also my outlet for this might not be the federal level.
Yeah.
My problem might actually be a state level or a local level, and it seems like one of the structural problems for me in the United States is a lack of civics education of where to take your problem.
I also think a big problem, and you know, speaking as a journalist, an enormous problem that must be solved immediately, is the collapse of my industry, and specifically the collapse of local news, right? The internet rewards scale. And so what we are converging toward is something much more like Britain has already, which is a small number of large ideologically sorted media outlets rather than a small number. Now, there's some offsetting, right? We're getting podcasts and talk radio and all, and YouTube streamers and all that. But in terms of who's doing the day-to-day, day in, day out reporting, which is really expensive and time-consuming to do, it's being done at the national level, and that means that, and also, you know, the podcasts and YouTubes, those things also scale. And so what it's doing is pushing people, all of the stories up to the national level. And so it's actually harder to know what's happening at the local level, much less to like figure out which city councilor you should lobby to fix some problem.
Yeah, definitely. I can think of also, like, we talk a lot about, like, trade, right? You know, that's been in the news quite a bit. The president has, like, zeroed in on trade deficits and that kind of thing. And it kind of gets lost in the shuffle that, like, a lot of times your problems might be, or what's keeping you from, let's say, starting a manufacturing business, might not be actually federal rules, it might be state rules. I know that certainly happened with my family. We had actually a manufacturing business, and the state of California put in rule after rule after rule after rule, which had nothing really to do with health and safety, even though they claimed it did, right? And what do you know? We're not manufacturing anymore, right? And so my father understood that, yes, it was the state of California that was the problem, right? I don't know today that necessarily...
But the workers who lost the jobs might not have understood that, right? Much
exactly.
less.
Yeah, and then, of course, then everyone has to have an outlet for their anger, and it's not necessarily, you know, your friend at the bar anymore. Now it's like we're going to, you know, pillory any sort of public official online.
I mean, I think scapegoating is just a natural tendency in part because it's so much more satisfying than like, there is a complex series of problems, many of which are unintended consequences of good things we wanted to do, right? Yeah. Like, it's much more satisfying. This is why conspiracy theories are so compelling, right? It is so much more satisfying to think, not that we live in a complex world of scarcity and trade-offs, but that like, there is a shadowy group of people who are doing all these terrible things. Because if that's true, even if you think, I mean, it is frightening that there is a large and shadowy and apparently incredibly competent group of people wrecking everything. Like, theoretically, you could get those people, make them stop, and then everything would be fine. Whereas if it's just, wow, all this governing stuff is super hard, like it doesn't offer the same scope for easy solutions.
This is where my plan to have Google run everything comes into play.
Interesting.
They know what I want before I do. Just give it to them, we all retire.
But it also, like, as you're saying, Megan, about like kind of the nuances just getting lost, because when you're wanting to have, you know, a proposal, right? Someone will take online, let's say, a very small sliver, right? And say, this is just absolutely wrong. Now we have to go and tank the bill and march on Washington over essentially nothing. And I think, Nan, you've kind of seen that dynamic change a little bit.
Yeah, but
That was a very telling sigh.
like, yeah, I can't tell you how many times we've been really close to an actually good reform. But if there was the smallest chance that someone somewhere could use this in a way that we don't like, even if that way is not necessarily illegal, then therefore we're walking. I was lucky enough to work for a time under Senator Enzi. Ugh, R.I.P. He always talked about the 80 and 20%. Like, just put aside the 20% where we disagree and focus on the 80% where we agree. I also think it's, you know, the 80% that's actually achievable, that would do something practical where we agree, that we could move forward on. He didn't view compromise as giving up, but we both get a thing out of this, and I really would like to see a whole lot more of that. But that's one reason why we need more former accountants in Congress.
Yes, well, earlier today, I saw Jonah Goldberg asked what his unpopular opinion was, and my unpopular opinion is that we have too much transparency, which is not something that, you normally see people say, and also too much good government. That I think that the reforms that that were meant totally benignly, right? You know, who could be against more democracy? Who could be against? But the primary reforms that led to a very small number of highly motivated voters deciding who the parties would nominate, rather than people who cared about winning the general election and had good insights as to how that might be possible outside of your highly polarized district. But also putting cameras in Congress. I personally love this. I basically kept cable for 5 extra years so I could get C-SPAN. I'm probably the only customer in the United States who has ever done this. But it means that everyone is performing. And then all of these activist groups, which have gotten so good, right, at generating these are you going to be dinged by this guy for something that increases taxes by $1, but that's a tax hike? Or are you going to be dinged for this thing that slightly increases the clearances around abortion clinics, but now you're restricting abortion clinics? Whatever it is, right, these groups have such granular transparency. And of course, voters aren't following the whole thing because no one can read these bills. I remember when Nancy Pelosi famously in the Affordable Care Act said, we have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. And people made fun of that. But if you've ever tried to read a bill, it's not a readable document because it's amends Section 238 of the Transparency Act of 1924 to read subsection 8, Clause 24 to read and rather than but. And you're okay.
I can remember, side note, trying to read the bill with you and a whole host of other healthcare experts around the time. We all had a listserv, and people chose different chunks of the pages to read and shared notes between organizations and across experts and opinion leaders and stuff so that we could digest the bill in a pre-super online time.
Gosh, that just takes me back to
Man, if we had Google Docs.
If you had AI at that point.
My fear about AI is, right, it's actually going to make it much easier to understand what legislation says. But in the same way that the word processor like made it easier to write clear legislation and also let the I won't say the word, let those people write longer bills that are more confusing. Like, I worry that AI, it's going to be like, wow, now I can understand what regulations mean. And they're like, okay, right now, I got AI too. Like, let's see.
Just in a Mach head, a couple recommendations for this one was to use more plain language in bills, but also to include the text of what you're changing. We call these red lines, and the docs exist. If you aren't a Hill person or a former Hill person, you just don't get to see them. But we could make those public.
We could publish those.
Hit go.
But another issue that is also brought up around the bills quite a bit is that like Congress is not really legislating. They're just kind of like pushing it off to the bureaucrats. I know that we've got the Supreme Court case that kind of upended a lot of that, but do we see any way that that is going to change at all?
I think they are probably going to have to start writing clearer bills, right? There's just less discretion now for the agencies to fill those spots. I mean, this may be, actually I should say, this is probably completely wishful thinking on my part because I can't make Congress do anything and neither can anyone else, right? They could write like, make things be good in crayon, this is the new law, and the bureaucracy would have to do with that what it could. But I think they should write clearer bills, and I think they should write more. But I also do think that we should give our bureaucrats more discretion, which is not something you hear a lot of libertarians say.
Not at all.
No. Not unlimited discretion, right? But like right now, the idea is that we want them to be like robots, right? They should make no judgments whatsoever. There should never be any possibility of abusing their power. My favorite story about this is that I was talking to someone who had gone into a cabinet level position in state government from the private sector. And so he walks into the office on day one. He's like, okay, well, let's get the team together, order some sandwiches. We'll sit down at noon and like have lunch and chat. And the secretary was like, oh no, you can't have sandwiches. Sandwiches are for overtime, right? And it's like this phenomenal waste of resources to be quibbling about the damn sandwiches. And there is a flow chart, which you can see on Jen Palka's amazing Substack, of when you can order sandwiches. There is a decision-making process. Like, have a reasonable thing. Like, they should not be ordering like caviar sandwiches for lunch every day, but and that kind of discretion, or the kind of discretion to just make some trade-offs. Not, like citing power lines, all the rest of it. Instead, what we do is they have to follow these hard rules, and then we're going to litigate the hell out of it. And then, like, 25 years in the future, we will have built 1 inch of power line while we're having blackouts, right? And that we need to shift in a bunch of directions. We need to review the ways in which we've empowered people to file too many and too weak lawsuits, but we also need to review the ways that we have tried to hamstring bureaucrats until they can't make decisions about, say, IT procurement or other things, and accept that, like, that might mean that occasionally someone in the government manages to funnel a contract to their friend. But right now, they're just funneling contracts to the same 5 companies because those are the companies that know how to work the rules, and that's actually worse, right? Like, give them some discretion and then make them accountable for the results. And I think part of the thing, and part of the reason Congress doesn't work, is that they don't want to be accountable for the results. The more transparency we've gotten, the more they're like, oh my gosh, like I can't do anything. If I did something, someone would be mad. What if I just sat here and the president wrote some executive orders? They prefer it, or the Supreme Court did it. And that's what everyone prefers because they don't want to be accountable for results.
Well, and I have to admit, I used to be part of the problem when it comes to nailing these guys to the wall when they did the smallest thing that I didn't like.
The first step is admitting you have a problem.
Well, as a grassroots organizer, and we would just, and we would use the most inflammatory language possible to get our members upset about the thing. And also now we're going to primary you and all the rest. And so when I went to a different organization, I basically had a religious experience after a vote didn't go the way I wanted. And I marched down to our VP office and I was like, I need $5,000 because I'm going to roll calls into all their district offices. They won't be able to operate. They're never going to cross me again. And Pete Sepp, National Taxpayers Union, great guy. He said the most amazing thing. He said, what if we want to work with them again? And that had never occurred to me, ever. And he's like, we can do your horrible plan, but what if you want to work with them again? And I was just like, oh, there's a really different way that we could do this. And it's changed everything. It's changed how I go about my work, my day-to-day, how I think about people, all of it. It was just day and night to think, I might want to work with them on something else.
And I think that this is something I've been thinking a lot about in our politics, is that so few people now are playing like they're in a repeat game. Right? Like, you watch what their conservatives now are doing, and they're like, we're going to create all these awesome new powers, and we're going to really screw all those people. They're going to, like, drive their women before you, like, what is it? No, drive the men before you, like, murder their babies, hear the lamentations of their women, something like that, right? And it's like, well, eventually you're going to lose an election. And that all the powers you've created are going to them. And they're also going to be really mad. And all your institutions are just as vulnerable. And I also see it on the Democratic side, right? Is like, what do I want to do? I want to destroy those people. I want to make it illegal to be those people. I am going to make sure none of them ever has a good job above the level of janitor for the rest of their lives. And like, that thing, and it's not just in politics, right? I think the Trump administration has made this like more blatantly as a government thing, and that obviously carries very special worries because the government has guns. And like, your local, like the activists at Google who conservatives like to complain about did not have guns. And that is a very major difference. But that said, I will say that like I saw, even starting under the Obama administration, a lot of conservatives becoming, religious conservatives especially, becoming increasingly convinced, and not entirely unreasonably so, that the end game was that it would be impossible to have kind of traditional religious beliefs around sexuality and have a job that required a college degree. That like, company after company was just going to, and the cancellation campaigns against businesses and all the rest of it was like, that like, sure, you can work in a junkyard and we'll leave you alone, but if you aspire to anything more, we're going to shut your school down. And I was actually just rereading this amazing piece by Mark Tushnet, who's a law professor, wrote in May of 2016, in which he was writing ending defensive crouch liberalism. And the argument was just basically like, because he was assuming Hillary was going to win, because Trump had sealed the nomination. And so it was just like, how many ways can we screw conservatives, undo every like legal, and some of that is just what happens, right? You think you're going to get control of the court, you get a lot of plans for stuff but it went beyond that. It was like, how do we attack their institutions using the power of the court? How do we like make it, to hell with the social conservatives, you lost the culture war, we won. And that mindset had already taken hold. I certainly, and you saw it play out in a lot of liberal institutions, peaking in 2020. And guys, you're all in a repeat game. You're gonna be around a long time. And the wheel goes round and round, and sooner or later, the fly on top is gonna be the fly on the bottom. So prepare for that moment, rather than trying to maximize, this moment. And I'm not sure I see signs of healing yet, but I hope they're coming soon.
Because one of the few things that Congress does do, I wouldn't say they accomplish it, but it's something that they do with their time, is try to undo the previous guy. And that's all they do. It's a total obsession because we took our ball and went home when we had a chance to be at the table and decisions were made, and it's both sides, and other people also put up obstacles to keep them from the table.
Yeah, I mean, like the other side is not often inviting them in with bounteous banquet of possible
but when
compromises.
There's no attempt or and no conversation when you're sitting at different tables, and then so we just get these like wild swings, and this isn't. I mean, I'm not going to get the most wonderful outcome I want in terms of a limited government piece of policy out of a compromised piece of legislation, but it's going to be a lot better for everyone for the rules to just stay kind of the same for a while. Even if the rules aren't perfect, business and individuals and families know what to do and how to work within the rules, but when the rules are different one day to the next and 1 year to the next, you can't plan. It's only just a system for maximal frustration.
Well, I think also, like, you know, at the end of the day, we the people are in control of the government, but I think we've had a decades-long experience and probably in hyperdrive in the last probably 20 years or something of running a lot of things through the executive, and that's not been such a good outcome.
Oh, I mean, I 100% agree with that, but I also think at this point it is the workaround of the fact that Congress does not want to legislate, right? They don't want to pass a normal budget. They don't want to do anything they could be held accountable for. Well, like the government has to do stuff. And I was against what Obama did on immigration, not because I was against the result, but I was against doing it by executive order. I was in fact against student loan forgiveness and also against doing it by executive order. But I mean, and I'm against many of Trump's executive order innovations, but part of that is the fact that if he went to Congress and tried to get a law, Congress would be like, it's too hard, I can't. And you know, that is the natural result because voters do want stuff to happen. And so they will ratify that if Congress doesn't do its job.
Congress now is making a point of actively shooting themselves in the foot to make it harder to do things if they ever wanted to. Looking at additional cuts to the ledge branch, which has fewer and fewer resources to take care of larger and larger swaths of people in their districts than ever had been intended. To do more and more types of work and cover more issues than we ever thought those staff could and would do. Cutting the budgets of the watchdog agencies. So they're really just cutting themselves off at the feet and trying to do their jobs, no legs.
We're coming up against time, so I do want to end with this one question, which is, despite everything that we've talked about right now, what gives you a sense of optimism for the future?
Look, America has a lot of problems right now, and we have more bearing down upon us in the form of an entitlement crisis. But that said, I'm heartened both by the great Adam Smith quote, "There's a lot of ruin in a nation." That, you know, it is always tempting when you're living it to be like, this is the end. Everything's going to hell. But you look back at our nation's history, and it includes a lot of much worse moments than what we're experiencing now. From the Red Scare to the Palmer Raids to chattel slavery to the Trail of Tears, right? America did some really awful stuff and also managed to do some pretty amazing stuff coming up on our 250th birthday of being a steadily improving, well, not steadily, but mostly improving, mostly moving in the right direction, of greater liberty and justice for all. I think when there are setbacks, there are real setbacks, but I think that for me, first of all, I genuinely do, when I go out into America and I'm not online dealing with people who are also spending too much time online, what I see is great. What I see is people who are raising families and like trying to do good for the world and being nice people and having friends and so forth. And obviously there are some people with problems, but I see communities that are looking for the best in like that they can do for each other. And I think that's what America is. It's not just the crazy online people. But, I also think this is that I can't fix the entitlement crisis. I'm pretty sure that whatever solution we settle on is not going to be the one that I would have designed. But what I can do, and I can't fix Donald Trump, by whom I am appalled. But what I can control is my reaction to Donald Trump. And I think that the kind of let's all collectively freak out for 4 years approach that was pioneered by many people in the establishment during the first Trump administration has turned out to be an abysmal failure, as you will notice by the fact that he is president now. And that what we can control is we can lean into actually trying to fix stuff. We can lean into not complaining about how terrible everything is, but what would work? And being normal about how we criticize him and treating, even though I think he is in many ways terribly abnormal, treating, working on the stuff that are normal complaints. If you don't like that he's cutting Medicaid, complain about that. If you don't like that he's deporting people without due process, complain about that. But do not start on the dark night of fascism is descending over the land, because those arguments don't, among other things, it's not effective. I think it is also polarizing and then just makes the other side even more crazy. And vice versa, when, the woke liberals are gonna come and make all your kids trans, that does not, actually solve a problem for America. But just try to be normal. Right? Normal America, healthy America, it starts with you. You are part of America. Be the change you want to see.
I would second everything that Megan just said, but the things, and I've really been thinking about this the last couple of days, because things my counselor says are things like what Megan said. You can only control your reaction, Nan. Also, you need these books on optimism. And we'll talk about it next time. So I was really thinking about this. And I realized the things that give me real hope and joy are when I see how immeasurably creative people are when it comes to finding solutions to so many problems, whether it's policy-wise, cultural, physical, health things, the environment, especially the things we've been talking about all day. We have it all within ourselves to make things better, and it's amazing, and there's just no end to what people can do just by virtue of being people and the way our brains and everything else are made, and that just astonishes me. And that gives me optimism. And I'd like to just tell you about this park, not far from where I live, that brings me so much joy and optimism. So it's called Clemmy John Tree. Some of you may know of this amazing park. It's out in Fairfax County. The name is for 3 children of the family who made it. So it's private and local, and I love it. And it was not a big government thing, because government would have never made something this amazing and beautiful. And it is the coolest park you've ever seen. And it's so inclusive. There's even a swing for wheelchair users. And they can get to all parts of it. And half of the activities are something that also teaches you something. So this isn't just a maze, it's also learning about the comparative distances between the planets and our place in the solar system. And the intentionality, the creativity, and overall the beauty behind it just fills me with joy. And I'm like, if that's possible, anything is.
I love something that John Collison, who is the co-founder of Stripe with his brother, said. That now that he has built a very large and successful business, every time he goes out into the world and he sees things, he's just stunned by how much competence it took to do anything, to make a building, to make little cream-filled sandwiches that are the same every time you buy it. I was just talking to someone the other night who's now dating a guy whose life is making jam and coaching cookie companies on how to make jam that feels like every little thing we do is both the culmination of thousands of years of human beings figuring stuff out. And it is also the culmination of someone who did a job excellently. And like everything in your life is filled, and mostly, because most of the American economy is domestic, it is mostly filled with your fellow Americans who did something excellently. Everything you see, every building, every like restaurant meal, everything. And like, that is amazing. We should be in awe. We live, as John Collison said, in a museum of excellence. And we should be marveling at it all the time. And that is what, instead of like, accentuate the positive, but like just look around and see how amazing it is that human beings figured out how to suspend this giant roof over our heads instead of like huddling in a little cave. That is like, we are an amazing species and we are an amazing country. And I think we will only continue to get more amazing still.
And I will end it there. Thank you so much, Nan Swift and Megan McArdle.
Thank you.